You told me you wanted to watch The Rabbi. Not yet. I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
Who's this?
Who was that
No.
speaking?
Are you all from 100 Central Street or 112?
Yeah.
I'm working on
I'm from 1550.
Huh?
I'm from 1550.
Who's that? You-
What's that?
Elaine.
Who is it?
Elaine.
Hello, Elaine. The people I can
talking?
see are from 100 Central, I think.
No, I'm from 1550.
Yes, I hear you, Elaine.
Thank you.
Talking to the other people. There's a Naomi and a
Renee.
Renee, and there's a
from,
Sylvia.
from
And there's a
Naomi from 100
Sandy too.
I
Yeah,
can't see
Sandy,
you.
I haven't gotten
Sandy,
to
your
Sandy 'cause your-
picture's not on there.
your camera's still off.
How do you
And,
do
and we
that?
have, yeah, from 100 Center Street. All right, and we have Elaine from 1550 and Faye from 100 Center Street. And
I'm working on
I
it,
think this is
Mom.
Elaine. It's
You-
Alan.
Well, I'm trying to do it for you. Here, you can listen to it until I can get the video going.
All right, great. So we'll get started in just a second, but people can feel free to chat for now.
What are we
And,
talking about?
We're going to talk about the book of Joshua, the third chapter of the book of Joshua. We, at 1550, at least, we have studied both the first and the second books of chapters of Joshua. And I know that we studied at least one of them.
Watch it on the computer.
on Center Street. I can't remember which one. And then, hold on one second, Sandy. And then all of a sudden, it was we had this weird pandemic thing happen to us, and our study of these things got delayed, and then it was Pesach, and so it's been
Hear it okay?
it's been quite a few.
Don't break the.
Alan, I'm just going to put you on mute for a minute while you figure that out, okay? It's been quite a few weeks. We've been trying to sort of get back to normal, and I'm hoping that now we will be back to normal.
Is this
plan will
normal?
be-
Come on now.
I don't know what counts as normal anymore, Sandy, that's for sure.
Well, this is not normal.
But what I mean is a normal routine of learning. Hi, Barbara.
Hi.
And, I mean, maybe at some point we'll get back into, a real normal, but this is what we call our new normal these days. So, hi, Francine.
I love.
Nice to
Hi,
nice to see your face.
Hi, Fran.
I don't know how to do you guys. How do I
Barbara.
do you?
Hi.
Sandy.
It's yeah, Sandy's picture is not popping up yet, but
No.
but we'll
Hello,
work
Renee.
it out. And
Hello.
Hi, Barbara.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi,
I'm
Barbara.
in San Francisco.
I can see that. Yeah.
I don't do everything right.
all right, so we'll be a few more. We'll give people a few more seconds to try to figure out how to get on if they're not on yet, and then we'll get started. The key, if you haven't been learning over Zoom yet so much, the key to learning over Zoom is patience, because Zoom really can only handle one person talking at a time, which makes things very complicated if you have something to say. So if you are using your iPad or your computer, if you go to under where it says participants, and click on the thing that says participants, you will see that there is a little, hi Jeannie, there's a little button that says raise hand. So if you have something to say, or you have a question or something like this, the best thing to do is to push that button, the raise hand button, and then it'll indicate to me that you've raised your, yep, Barbara got it.
Okay, but it's
that
not
is-
on that. It's on the far right.
It's under more. It's under
Oh,
the
okay.
Under
more.
more.
It depends on, unfortunately, it depends on your device.
Yeah,
So,
mine's
what
under, mine's
kind of
under.
device are you using, Barbara?
I don't see it.
All right, so Barbara figured it out. So if you can't do that, then just say, then you can just wave at me, or you can say, excuse me. But if I don't hear you right away, please be patient. If you're on the phone, I believe you can raise your hand in a virtual way by pushing star. Oh boy,
6.
star. I want to say star 6. Faye, would you try that?
Okay, here we go. Did it
No, it's
work?
not that. No, it didn't work. So I'll have to refresh my memory about how to do it from the phone, and I'll let you people. I'll
Okay.
let everybody know that. So we had another person joined by the telephone who is not Faye and not Elaine. Would you identify yourself?
Vivian,
Hi, Vivian.
Vivian.
Rabbi, yesterday we did star 9 for the poetry meeting. Maybe that would work.
Yeah,
Can you hear
Vivian,
me?
You try star 9?
Okay, let me try it.
Yes. Yes.
You
it
hear
works.
me?
It works. Yep.
It worked.
Okay, so
Do you see my arm go up or something?
I do. It's amazing. It looks just like your arm. It's blue.
No, I'm wearing a jacket. No, but you just see my arm. You don't see me.
Yes,
Just a minute. I'm putting it where you can hear
So
it.
thank you. If you're on a phone and you want to say something, push star 9.
Okay, you listen to it. I'm gonna go.
Okay, have a nice time.
Bye.
Bye.
You want them to be able to do it?
Rabbi Jim? Rabbi Jim,
Yeah.
could you ask everybody to mute themselves all the time?
I'm gonna mute everybody in just a minute.
Okay.
And so when I'm talking, I'm gonna be muting everybody,
Good.
but I'm not going to make it. I'm not gonna make it such that you can't unmute yourself. Now, that means that you have great responsibility not to unmute yourself by mistake and start talking to your cat, or to go, go out of the room and get yourself a glass of water from the
Faucet.
kitchen. Yeah. So, but I will try to remain vigilant so that I can stop. I can mute people if they forget. But if you can do your best not to unmute yourself, that would be really helpful. And so please do feel free at any time to raise your hand and interrupt. And we'll happy to entertain questions, comments, complaints, fetches, whatever you got. We'll get started. Great. I'm going to mute everybody now. And for the people who have video, I am going to, I'm going to share a screen so that you can read along with me the text we've got. If you don't have a screen, then I will always be telling you what text we're going to look at. All the texts that I prepared for today are in the Bible. So if you have a Bible in front of you, you should be able to find those texts. But if you don't have a Bible, or if you're not good at flipping through a Bible quickly, know that I will always be reading these texts out loud. So you shouldn't have any problem. Following. And if you don't hear something, please do not hesitate to raise your hand and ask me to repeat it. Okay. All right. So Rosalind is just joining us, and I'll wait till her audio is connected before I start reading. But right now, I'm going to share I'm going to share the screen with you. Let's see here. I got to find the screen before I can share it. Hold on a second. All right, good deal. All right, so can everyone who has a screen see that we are in Joshua chapter 3? And I'll try to make this bigger. There we go. This is weird. I'm not sure what's going on here, but it's, all right, we'll just do our best. All right, good deal. All right, so I'm going to start reading here, and again, please feel free to raise your hand if you need to, if you have a question. All right, so just a background, right? That in chapter 1 of Joshua, right, we are given the information that Moses has died, and Joshua is the new leader of the Israelites and needs to be strong and resolute, to have courage and be, firm of heart. And then in the second chapter, we have the fascinating story of Rahab, the harlot in Jericho, who hides the spies that are sent. And this is one of the ways that we see again and again the way that the prophets in the prophetic books are constantly riffing on events from Torah. So many of you probably recall the story of the spies when Moses sends the spies into the land of Canaan, and they come back with a report saying that the place is great, but it's filled with giants who are going to eat us alive, and we feel like we're just grasshoppers. And that is what precipitates the Israelites needing to remain in the wilderness for 40 years. So it's now the next generation that is going to be leaving finally the wilderness and entering into the promised land. And then we get to chapter 3. So here is chapter 3. Early next morning, right? Now, does this term early next morning, which is actually Vayashkem Yehoshua Baboker. So literally it means and Joshua jumped up in the morning. Does that ring a bell for anybody in various Torah studies, Torah stories, things that happen in the morning? Or just in general, things in Jewish life that are supposed to happen in the morning? No hands. Okay, so I will say, I will tell you. Oh, someone did raise their hands. This is great. Okay, so I'm going to unmute you.
Oh.
Please go ahead.
I know that Abraham was supposed to take guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, exactly.
Abraham was
I can
supposed
hear you.
to take guys. Oh, yeah. Abraham was supposed to sacrifice Isaac. He took him in the morning.
Exactly, right? So Abraham got up early in the morning to go do God's will, right? So this is a very good example. Thank you, Faye. It's a very good example because every time, right, that someone is described as getting up early in the morning to do something, right, they are rushing to do God's will, right? And so this is what is important here, right? That Joshua gets up early in the morning, right, and along with all of the Israelites, right, and they get up super early to do God's will. In our contemporary life, one of the things that we do we say that we're supposed to do early in the morning, right, is we do a bris. So when we have a bris, right, we're supposed to do it early in the morning so we can so we can, be very quick to do the mitzvah. And in Orthodox circles, there's very often what we call hashkama minions, right? So that people will get up early in the morning for their Shabbat service, so they can say the Shema right at the earliest moment that it is possible to say the Shema in the morning. So people like to do things with alacrity. So this is one of those places where this happens, right? And so what are they going to do? They're going to set out from Shittim and march to the Jordan. Now I found a map. Let's see if this is it. All right, so let's see. We'll have a look at this map. All right, give you an idea of. This doesn't really seem to be as good as the map that I thought it was. Okay, so let's see here. Let's just take this one. It's probably. Oh, this is also Pinterest. Oh, yeah. All right, so can everyone see the map that I've got here? So where it says Abel Shittim, right, is on one side of the river, right, and on the other side of the river, right, is Jericho, right, and so this is in Gilgal, which we will encounter in the next chapter. I think it's the next chapter, right? It's not entirely clear where that is, but this is this very important theme in the book of Joshua, right? Especially towards the beginning, is this idea of crossing, right? We are crossing over from one place to the other, from our wilderness into our promised land. So, and remember, you may remember, right, that this is one of the meanings of Ivri, right, of the person who crosses over. So again, another link back to Abraham, Ivri, right? Abraham, who was the one that crosses boundaries and goes from one place to the other. All right. So they set out from Shittim and marched to the Jordan. They did not cross immediately, but spent the night there. 3 days later, the officials went through the camp and charged the people as follows. Right, very interesting that they wait 3 days. They sit here and they wait 3 days before the next thing is supposed to happen. Why do you think it might be 3 days that they wait and they don't cross immediately? They sit there for 3 days. What might be the reason that they do that? Any ideas?
Purify.
All right. Okay. Hold on a second, Naomi. I saw Suzanne raise her hand.
Sorry.
So that's not a problem. So I'm trying to find Suzanne here in my list. There you are. Okay, I'm going to unmute you. Okay, so you go ahead, Suzanne.
Okay, so 3 days reminds me of the Purim story when there were 3 days before, during which the Jews before the fight that they were allowed to have.
Right. Great. So yeah, 3 days. So 3 days.
They spent 3 days praying before they would act.
Right. So when you have a big momentous thing that's going to happen, right? We need to prepare ourselves, and in a sort of a biblically sanctioned amount of time to prepare ourselves is 3 days. All right. So Naomi, go ahead.
It seems to me there was also a waiting period at Sinai before the commandments so that people could purify themselves.
Yes, exactly. That was one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of the 3 days was precisely that there, there's no specific thing here about washing your clothes and so on and so forth, but that is a big deal before the revelation at Sinai, right? That we have to prepare ourselves, we have to purify ourselves and make sure that we're really ready to this, right? And so but I think what links both of these comments, right, is this idea that we are coming to this sort of moment of crisis is the wrong word, I think, although that would be appropriate in the Purim story. But we're coming to this sort of monumental moment where something really significant is going to change. And it's going to be an example of, and I think this is it's at least in Joshua, right? It's going to be an example of God's covenant with the people. All right, so let's continue here. Let's continue here for a second. Okay, so 3 days later, the officials went through the camp and charged the people as follows. When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God being borne by the Levitical priests, you shall move forward. Follow it, but keep a distance of some 2,000 cubits from it, never coming any closer, so that you may know by what route to march, since it is a road you have not traveled before. All right. Okay, and then here we get our purification, right? And Joshua said to the people, purify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will perform wonders in your midst. Okay. All right, so I think what we'll do is we will, very interesting, right? That now the Ark of the Covenant, right, is a big part of the procession, right? And why might we want to stay far away from the Ark? Go ahead, Naomi. Oh, okay, Naomi, and then I have another raised hand. Go ahead.
It's the Holy of Holies. You don't come near it except the high priest on Yom Kippur.
Okay, so, right. So this is what's going to be in the Holy of Holies, right? And actually, just last week, hold on one second. Is that Faye? Faye?
Because God's presence is there, and He's just too intense. You can't come near God. He's just too overwhelming. His mighty power.
Exactly. So what you have, right, in both of these answers, right, is something that actually happened in the Haftarah that we read last week with Parashat Shmini, where King David is taking the Ark of the Covenant towards Jerusalem, and when they get to a certain point, the oxen that are dragging it sort of stumble a little bit, and one of the people who's been given the honor of walking next to the ark gets worried that it's going to fall, and he reaches out his hand to steady it, and when he touches it, he gets zapped, right? And that's the end of that guy. And David gets really freaked out about it, and so he doesn't bring it to the city of David right away. The story goes on from there, but it's sort of a cautionary tale, right? You want to be close to divinity, right? But you don't want to be too close, because that will lead to trouble. All right, Suzanne, go ahead.
Oh, I just looked up to see what the distance is, and it looks to be about 100 feet. So, that's like staying 100 feet behind a school bus. It's about that distance.
Right. Actually, it's interesting. 2,000 cubits in my Jewish study Bible, it says that it is. It says it's 1,000 meters, which makes sense because I've always understood that a cubit is 18 inches or so. So that would mean like 1,000 yards, which is really quite far, a lot farther than the 100 feet, right? And so, and I'm just trying to figure out the practicalities of this, especially in comparison with the story from Samuel, right, where the guy is standing right next to it, so close, in fact, that it was easy for him to touch it. But really interesting that they talk about that it's sort of like social distancing today, right? Are you supposed to be 6 feet away from someone? Are you supposed to be 13 feet away? It's never entirely clear, right? All right, good. So I pulled out a few other traditions about the Ark, which I think would be really really interesting sort of background. Again, one of the things that's really fascinating about the as I mentioned at the top of the hour, but not everyone, perhaps not everyone was here to hear it, right, is that you have this situation where the prophetic books are constantly looking back at the books of Torah. So when you mention the Ark of the Covenant, right, it brings us back to Deuteronomy. And that's another sort of general thing to say about the book of Joshua, which I think is pretty interesting, right, is that very often we'll see a lot of connections, especially to Deuteronomy in the book of Joshua, with a real emphasis on the idea of covenant, the covenant between God and the people, and the people's responsibility to be obedient to that covenant. One of the things, one of the really resonant passages, which brings up this, you can see it on the screen if you have it, the business of Joshua being strong and resolute, right? So, and he, meaning God, charged Joshua, son of Nun, be strong and resolute, for you shall bring the Israelites into the land that I promised them on oath, and I will be with you. When Moses had put down in writing the words of this teaching to the very end, Moses charged the Levites who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, saying, take this book of teaching and place it beside the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God, and let it remain there as a witness to you, right? So the Ark, what does the Ark contain, right? The Ark contains the book of the teaching, right? So, HaTorah, right? A Sefer HaTorah, which is, if you have a little bit of Hebrew, you can see Sefer HaTorah Hazeh, right? So, which of course we know a Sefer Torah as being what sits in the Ark, right? That in synagogues, right? Our Sefer Torah sit in arks. So this is, an echo. Our current practice today echoes the practice that is put down here in the Torah. Now, whether or not this was the same Torah, we're not going to get into those conversations. That's a little bit too abstruse for me. All right, good. Let me see what the next one was. Oh, and then this idea of the power of the Ark, right? And actually, we'll look at this one in a second, I think. All right, so we'll continue with Joshua chapter 3. All right, so follow it, keep a distance of some 1,000 cubits from it, never coming any closer, right? Obviously, except for the Levites, who are the ones who actually have to carry it, so that you may know by which route to march, since it is not traveled before, right? A reference to the fact that they are now in the promised land, in a place where they've never been before, right? And then Joshua said to the people, purify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will perform wonders in your midst. When God is performing wonders, what is the first thing you think of? Naomi, you're unmuted, I think, so you can tell me if something comes to mind.
Plagues.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, the plagues.
The plagues, right? And more generally, the Exodus from Egypt, right?
The
So
Red
very
Sea
interesting. This is setting up the idea, right, that here we have the sort of final completion of the Exodus, right? Then Joshua ordered the priests, take up the Ark of the Covenant and advance to the head of the people. And they took up the Ark of the Covenant, right? And so just as background, right, at this point, I'm assuming that their encampment is the same as it was in the book of Numbers, right? Where the Ark and the tabernacle and everything's in the middle, and all of the various tribes are arrayed around the Ark, right? But now the Ark is going to go to the head of the people. And they took up the Ark of the Covenant and marched at the head of the people. And the Lord said to Joshua, this day, for the first time, I will exalt you in the sight of all Israel, so that they shall know that I will be with you as I was with Moses. Right? Very important. So this is all, again, sort of a moment of, as I said before, in terms of boundaries, right? This is also a big moment of transition, right? That Moses is the head of the people, right? is now dead and not forgotten, obviously, but that transition of power needs to happen, and it's not a one-time thing, right? So there's been various ways that Joshua has been given the mantle of leadership, right? But here God says, for the first time, I'm going to make it clear to everybody that you are in the same position vis-a-vis me as Moses was. For your part, command the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant as follows. When you reach the edge of the waters of the Jordan, make a halt in the Jordan. And Joshua said to the Israelites, come closer and listen to the words of the Lord your God. By this, Joshua continued, you shall know that a living God is among you, and that he will dispossess for you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. The ark of the covenant of the sovereign of all the earth is advancing before you into the Jordan. Now, all right, so we'll stop there for a second. Okay, so it's clear, right, from here that part of what the role of the ark is, right, is as a sort of military vanguard, right? That these, I read something interesting that this list of the various ites, right, the Canaanites and the Hittites, and the that there are you know, we see this list all the time. It's not always the same list, but what I was led to believe based on what I read today is that this list always includes seven groups, right? And so it's not necessarily any specific set of groups. It's 7 groups, which represents the totality, right? So that the Israelites will inherit the entirety of the land of Canaan, and not be sharing the land with any of these groups. Now, the reality of this situation, based at least on what we can read in the books of the Bible, right, is much more complicated. But this is the sort of claim, right, that there's always going to be this dispossession. All right, so let's look now at the other text that I mentioned, right? Very familiar text if you are a shul goer in a reasonably traditional synagogue. You will recognize these verses, right? This is the book of Numbers. They marched from the mountain of the Lord a distance of 3 days. The ark of the covenant of the Lord traveled in front of them on that 3 days journey to seek out a resting place for them. And the Lord's cloud kept above them by day as they moved on from the camp. And when the ark was to set out, Moses would say, advance, O Lord, may your enemies be flee before you, right? Vayhi bin soa ha'aron, vayomer Moshe kuma Adonai, vayifutsu oivecha, vayanusu misanecha mipanecha, right? Those words flow off the tongue, or at least off my tongue, because they are part of our Torah service in the synagogue. Yeah, go ahead, Naomi. You're still muted, Naomi. Naomi, you're still muted. There you go.
We've got 3 days purification. We've got the extra day standing there, and now we've got 3 more days. This is a very.
No, this is in the book of Numbers. This is in the book of Numbers. This is not
right.
in Joshua. Now, no, that I'm very glad you asked, because it would be very easy to get confused. No, this is just pointing out, right, that there is a tradition in Torah, right, not only of the holiness of the ark, right, and the sort of the covenantal power, right, as a reminder to people, as in Deuteronomy, right, that the ark is what is going to remind us of the covenant, and its holiness is such that we can't get too close to it, right? Here, right, in this passage from Numbers, right, the point is that the ark is sort of like this military vanguard. It protects right, the people from their enemies. And in fact, it on its own can kind of scatter its enemies, right? It can scatter the enemies of the people, which is a very interesting concept. All right, let me just see what the next thing was. Okay, yeah, right, okay. All right, so we will, I don't know what happened here. Excuse me 1 second. Let me see if I can figure out. There we go, okay. I don't know why all of a sudden it's gray, but oh. Okay. The Ark of the Covenant of the Sovereign of all the earth is advancing before you into the Jordan, right? If you've got the Ark of the Covenant in front of you, right, you have no need to worry about any of your enemies. Okay. When the feet of the priests bearing the Ark of the Lord, the Sovereign of all the earth, come to rest in the waters of the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan, the water coming from upstream, will be cut off and will stand in a single heap. Okay. Okay, so let's see here, just one moment. Okay.
Back at the Red Sea.
It's just like the Red Sea, right? And we'll get into that a little bit more in a moment, okay? So when the people set out from their encampment to cross the Jordan, the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant were at the head of the people. Now just try to imagine this scene, right? Where you've got the Ark of the Covenant with all the Levitical priests and anyone else who's sort of able to withstand the intense pressure of being next to the Ark, right? They're all up there, and some 1,000 meters behind them is everybody else, right? So just keep that image in your mind for a moment. Suzanne, would you like to say something?
I just wondered, the phrase "in the waters of the Jordan" was "the waters of the Jordan" is repeated. Could you comment on that?
I think what it is that one use of it is prepositional, right? Another word for prepositional is locative, right? It's location. So that's where the people are. That's where the priests are. Their feet will be in the water of the Jordan, right? And when that happens, right, the waters of the Jordan now being used as a noun, as a subject, right? In the subject, I don't know what it is that in English, I can never remember the nominal case, I guess, is what it would be in languages with, where the grammatical terms are more clear to me. That is the subject of the sentence. That is the subject of a clause now, right? So that's why they use it twice this way. But it's a sort of confusing syntax, to be sure. Is that clear?
Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, yes, okay, so imagine that, I said imagine that picture. Now the Jordan keeps flowing over its entire bed throughout the harvest season. I guess important parenthetical information. Has anyone been to the Jordan?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so what does it look like, Naomi?
When I saw it, it looked like a creek.
Right, right. So this is a very interesting sort of historical question. Why would the waters of the Jordan need to be split the way the waters of the Red Sea were split, right? When the Jordan is hardly a mighty river, right? And so I don't know the answer to that. I'm not going to claim that the Jordan was never a mighty river. Obviously, riverbeds change, the size of rivers change over time, so on and so forth. So I'm not going to make any claim like that. But I do think it's very interesting, right, that they seem that the book here seems to be claiming, right? It almost feels like it's pleading, right? It's making a special pleading to say that the Jordan keeps flowing over its entire bed throughout the harvest season, right? To sort of say, no, really, there was a lot of water. There was a lot of water. It really needed to be split. But as soon, be that as it may, but as soon as the bearers of the ark reached the Jordan and the feet of the oh boy, sorry guys. I don't know why this happens, but I'm a little frustrated. Okay. But as soon as the bearers of the ark reached the Jordan and the feet of the priests bearing the ark dipped into the water at its edge, the waters coming down from upstream piled up in a great heap a great way off at Adam, the town next to Zarethan, and those flowing away downstream to the sea of the Arabah, that means the Dead Sea, ran out completely. So the people crossed near Jericho. The priests who bore the ark of the Lord's covenant stood on dry land exactly in the middle of the Jordan, while all Israel crossed over on dry land until the entire nation had finished crossing the Jordan. All right, so very interesting notion, right, that that Naomi has already pointed out, right, that this hard not to it's hard not to make it's hard to connect this to the crossing of the Red Sea, right? What besides the sort of general tone or the general context of it, is there anything in particular that makes you think of the Red Sea? Okay, hold on one second here. I'm hearing somebody. Maybe it's Sandy. Okay.
Okay.
Want to make sure everyone is
Definitive crossing. Yeah,
Who's talking?
it was a definitive crossing.
Who?
Why am I
What?
echoing?
In what?
Why am I echoing?
I don't know. Which one is which is the definitive crossing, and what do you mean?
Well, they both were.
Yeah,
This is weird.
right. I think you're the only one hearing the echo. Is anyone else hearing Naomi's echo? If you are, then you can raise your hand. Okay. Oh, you're hearing it? Okay, that's funny. I'm not. Oh, that's really strange. All right. All right, Sandy, hold on one second. Let me find you, Sandy. Okay, go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, I want to go back to when a couple of paragraphs, and
Okay.
he said, and they were, and you went on ahead. First, that he was an enemy. If you were to go back and before you went on to this last part, and now is definitely not the subject. Now is a preposition. It's an adjective. It's not the subject of that sentence.
What?
The word, you mean the word now?
Yeah, the way you've translated it. It's an English translation.
No, what I meant was the subject of the clause is the phrase "the waters of the Jericho." Suzanne was asking why the waters of the waters of the Jordan, why that phrase "the waters of the Jordan" had been repeated, and the first one it was because that phrase had two specific and distinct functions. So I'm happy. We'll move on, but I'm happy to explain it.
We could discuss it another time.
Exactly. Great. Thank you, Sandy. All right. So go ahead, Naomi. Are you still echoing?
Apparently not. It got tired of
Okay,
hearing
good.
itself. But no, they were both definitive crossings. And
Yes.
there's also the whole idea of water as purification
Yes.
for
Right.
another, for umpteen different uses.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think that actually points to a pretty significant distinction between the two crossings, right? Because the first crossing, right, happens in the fog of war, so to speak, right? The Israelites are really freaked out. They thought they had left the Egyptians behind, and all of a sudden the Egyptians appear, right? And they're bearing down on them, right? And they freak out, and they're worried that, and this is one of my favorite lines you know, in Torah, you know, it talks about how the people started fetching to Moses, like there weren't enough graves in Egypt. You had to bring us out here to die in the desert. And so, you know, and then, so that is a deliverance, right? It's you know, it's God saving the people from a terrible fate, right? Now, this is a slightly different mode, right? Because there's no enemy chasing them, right? In fact, they're like the Egyptians, right? In chapter 2, one of the things that actually is remarkable, right, is that Rahab, the harlot, who is the person that the spies engage with in Jericho, says that the fear of the Israelites, the terror, right? The Israelites have struck terror into the inhabitants of the land of Canaan because they have heard tell of what has happened in Egypt, right? They heard tell of all these wonders and portents. So now it's much more of a covenantal thing, right? And there's no sense of, at least explicitly, in the story of the crossing of the Red Sea, of any kind of a purification, right? It happens so quickly, and they're running, and then the sea closes again, right, in order to destroy the Egyptians, right? Whereas here, there's no indication that anyone is harmed in the process of this crossing. But it does, as Naomi points out, I think quite astutely, have a whole sort of emphasis on purification, right? Like a mikvah, right? It's almost like a mikvah, right? They go into the river and they come out and they're already in sort of a different ontological space, right? They're somehow transformed by this crossing, right? And I do think that that's one of the things that's so important about both of these crossings, right? Is that there is this sort of monumental, there's this incredible moment of transition, right? So it's what we call Geulah at the crossing of the Red Sea, right? Redemption or deliverance, right? From this terrible situation. And here it is really a transition into, you know, sort of a further transition into the covenant with God, right? God sort of bringing to fruition the promises that he's made to the people previously. All right, so I'm gonna show you a couple of other texts. The word that I really want to focus on in English is the word heap here in verse 16, right? The waters coming down from upstream piled up in a single heap, right? So I'm going to try to find this word in Hebrew. Neid echad, right? Neid echad, right? And that is a word that is repeated in the word in Joshua's when Joshua's describing what's going to happen in verse 13, right? In a single heap. So we'll find it here. Hamayim v'hayarden malei al kol. I don't know if I can find it here. Okay. And anyway, but I didn't find it, but just point out very interesting thing that I hadn't noticed previously, right? In verse 14, when the people set out from the encampment, right? Vayahi bin soah ha'am. So it's not Vayahi bin soah ha'aron when the ark set off, but when the people set off. It's kind of interesting.
To the right of your pointer?
Yeah. Right here, you mean?
One line up. I don't know if you already pointed that. Right above your pointer. To the right.
Yes, right here.
To the right. Did you already point that out?
Thank you. You found it for me. Thank you, Jeannie. I really appreciate it. This is the problem with these Safari or sheets, right? Is that Hebrew uses so many fewer words than English that it's very difficult to figure out what verse you're in. So, but thank you. That's exactly right. Here's Neid Echad. So the same word Neid. All right. So let's look over here. All right. So we looked at this one. All right. So these are the two. This is the piece for the two pieces of I put it out this way in my source sheet because it would be easier to find Neid Echad, right? Neid Echad, a single heap. Okay. Where else do we see those words, right? So Ne'eru Mayim Nitzavu Kamo Neid Nozlim, right? In English, this is from the Song of the Sea, okay? Describing the splitting of the sea. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The flood stood straight like a wall. So the word that's used in translation is different, but the word in Hebrew is the same, right? Kamo Neid, right? Kamo Neid. So it's a very clear indication, right, that the author of Joshua, right, is playing off of this motif from the Song of the Sea. And here we see it also in Psalm 78, which talks about, actually it's sort of a similar thing. It talks about God's covenant with the people and how the people are, sort of the typical biblical thing, and the people don't live up to the covenant, as people are, unfortunately, we're people, and we don't always do everything right? So he performed marvels in the sight of their father in the land of Egypt, the plain of Zoan. He split the sea and took them through it. He made the waters stand like a wall. So again, Kamo Neid, right? He made the water stand up, Vayat Sev, right? Like a water or like a big heap. All right. So, and according to the Bible commentary that I was looking at today, that word Neid is used only in the context of the splitting of the Red Sea and the splitting of the Jordan. That's the only time that word is used, which is really interesting. If it's true, I'm just telling you that the commentary said that, but it's a pretty trustworthy commentary. So I would tend to believe it. So that's really interesting, right? That this is that sort of complete. But again, I would really like to focus in this on the idea of that these are two sort of very liminal moments, right, in the history of the Israelite people, right, or at least in the myth of the Israelite people. And it's very important, I think, right, that they are parallel, right? And as I said, thanks to Naomi pointing it out, right, that they have very different functions, but they also serve as sort of a beginning, right, of the people's wandering in the desert, right, which was supposed to be a short wandering and ended up being 40 years, right? That's the splitting of the Red Sea. And then there's a similar splitting of the Red Sea 40 years later, right, which is the end, the actual end of their time in the wilderness. And now they've come finally to the promised land, right? So that sort of puts a nice round end on it. Okay, so I have more material for, we can go start with chapter 4, but it feels like we should probably stop for a moment and get people's reactions. So I'm going to stop sharing, and we'll come back to so for everyone can see everybody, and I will just ask for responses, thoughts, ideas, questions that came up in the course of our learning today. Naomi.
Earlier, I had oh, the echo is back. I wanted to explore the idea of the law being beside the ark and within the ark.
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Is this a translation issue?
I mean,
Is it a translation issue?
It could be a translation issue, or it could be the thing to remember. Naomi, I'm just going to mute you because you're going a bit here. The thing to remember about it's certainly true of Torah, but it's true of the Bible in general, right? Is that, and this is a very interesting, fact in relation to the series of chapters that we're going to be reading now, right? Is that the Bible is very often much more interested in preserving traditions than it is in harmonizing traditions, right? So very often what you'll find, and we'll see one of these in the next chapter, chapter 4 that we'll look at next week, or actually next week is going to be special. So I'm going to give you that heads up in just a minute. But in 2 weeks, when we get back to this, you'll notice that there are two traditions right next to each other, right? Verse 8 says one thing and verse 9 says something that's quite a bit different, right? And so and that's also true at a larger sort of more macro level, right? That you see this in Torah, right? Where you'll see the same story repeated twice, right? With significant sometimes distinctions between them, right? So some people make a big deal of saying, oh, we gotta harmonize everything. We got to decide what the real story is, right? I don't think that was important to the people who wrote the Bible, nor is it particularly important to me, right? What's important to me is, the way that we can sort of make meanings different, sometimes different meanings, sometimes a single meaning out of the various stories that we read. But yeah, so that's it's an important point. So I don't know about that one in particular, Naomi, but I can have another look at it. Where does the Sefer Torah actually sit? Is it in, right?
Yeah.
Or is it beside, right? Or is it sometimes the idea that the covenant, right, is besides the ark, right? Or God's presence is described as being kind of above the ark, right? And so what's in the ark is of less importance. It's a good question. All right, other thoughts?
It's 2,000 years to quibble.
Yes, right. If there's nothing that Jews like more than to quibble. All right, Jeannie, I see Jeannie, and then I see Jeannie, you have to unmute yourself. And I see, and Barbara, are you waving goodbye or you want to talk? Barbara, you'll be after Jeannie, okay?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeannie.
Do I understand this correctly that they go from where they cross the Jordan? Jericho's on the other side of the Jordan.
Right. Jericho is the first stop. It's the first stop. It's sort of like the Kenmore station at on the Green Line. If you're coming from Brookline, right? If you stop at St. Mary's, right, you're still in Brookline, right?
Well, I just mean it's a terrible echo. Maybe I'm too loud. But my point is, so Jericho's on the other side of the Jordan, and you describe that as the land of Canaan, right?
Right.
So that's very political. I mean, that's very controversial now.
It certainly is. It certainly is. Well, that's one of the reasons that we say, that's why one of the reasons that I say the land of Canaan, right, rather than Israel, right, which a more right-wing person might say, they're crossing into Israel, right, because they want to affirm, right, that this is Israel according to the Bible. Right, it's the land of Canaan according to our traditions, and so you can put whatever kind of political spin on it that you want, but from my perspective, I'm just trying to be neutral.
But is this the first reference? Is this the first reference to the land of Canaan being including the other side of the Jordan?
Well, no. This is so if you remember that map, which I can show you again next time, this is on the Jerusalem side of the Jordan, right? Jericho is, right?
Oh, that's what I was asking.
That's what I was wondering. All right, go ahead, Barbara.
Okay, when you mentioned mikveh and these are two references to water crossing over. Water has always played a big, I can't even find the word for it, but it matters. It's obviously part of life. And I'll just take it further into what we'll say is the New Testament. Water is vitally important and still continues. So
Absolutely.
water is obviously not just symbolic, but it is necessary.
Right, right. And it's crucial right now in the cycle of the Torah readings that we're doing right now, right? Water is a very important component, right, in the priestly duties, right? Because washing and purifying yourself, right? It's not about physical cleanliness, right? It's about ritual purity. And that's true of mikvah also, right? We don't go into the mikveh because we're dirty, right? We go into the mikveh because we are representing some sort of a transition in our state, right? In our spiritual states, right? Some people will continue to use the language of purity. Others, will use different. Sorry, my seat just decided that it needed to drop me. So anyway, all right. So final thoughts before we close. All right. Well, thank you all very much for participating. And we will. So next week will be a very special event. It'll be at 3 as opposed to it's gonna be 3 as opposed to 2:30. But just like yesterday, we had Yom HaShoah with the rabbis from Jack Satterhouse and from Fireman down in Randolph. We are going to have a Yom HaAtzmaut, a celebration of Israel Independence Day, which is going to should be really nice. As you may have met many of you have met Rabbi Lior, who happens to live in the townhouses near Cohen, and has led services at 100 Center Street a number of times. She is Israeli, and so it's obviously a special significance for her, but obviously for every Jew who is connected with Israel, it's also a very important day. So that will be our order of business next week on Wednesday, 3 o'clock. And obviously, Jewish or not Jewish, you're more than welcome to join us. It should be really a meaningful ceremony. And then the following week, we will get back into reading the prophets. We will continue with I do promise that we will move on from Joshua. I don't think we'll read every single chapter in Joshua, but the opening chapters up through the Battle of Jericho are so full of wonderful material that it's really interesting to read. I'm obviously very open to feedback. Please feel free to email me or call me if you have concerns, and I will look forward to seeing you all very soon. And don't forget Friday night we have I'll be singing at 5, and then we'll have services at 5:30. So if you're around, please do join us. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. I'm gonna unmute everybody right now so everyone can say goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Very nice to see you all.
Nice to see you,
Great to
everybody.
see you all. And feel free to stay on the line and chat.
So, Rabbi, am I unmuted?
He's gone.
Oh,
Chat with
he's
one
there.
another.
He's still there. He's still there. So, yeah, I would like to ask just clarify something. I think I'm still confused about.
Oh,
Let's see.
he left.
He left?
The
Oh,
rabbi,
okay, well, maybe I'll ask all of you. So they're crossing over the river. So he said Jericho's on the same side of the river as Jerusalem, but they're
Yes.
about to cross over, right?
Yes.
that's what he said.
I mean, they're going to cross over. The word Hebrew is about, like Abraham crossing over. So I'm just trying to nail this down about the land of Canaan and the origins of, the controversy today as to about the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan and what was promised and where they were and all this. So I'm confused because he said Jericho's on the same side of the river as Jerusalem, but they're getting ready to cross over, and the other side was the land of Canaan as well. So, and
No, they're crossing.
On one of my trips to Israel, the Israelis had just opened, given Jordan or Jericho back to the others. Anyway, we came down there at night in a bus between the river or a lake and Jericho, and it was definitely there. I thought at the time the buses that we had, the bus that we had, it wouldn't take but one rocket to wipe us all out.
it was definitely what?
It's definitely on the west of the river.
Okay. So what are they crossing over?
They were crossing the river. They were on the east side. I think Canaan is, I don't know. I have to get a map out.
I got to see that map again. They're going from Shittim to Jericho. Is that right?
It occurs to me they're on the wrong side of the river anyway, because I suspect if I were coming from Egypt to cross.
I know. I'm totally confused.
On the east bank, on the west bank.
Exactly. That they didn't want to eat. Exactly.
Rather than the east bank going towards Iraq.
Exactly. So
they came down, when they came from Egypt, they came down southern Israel and up the east side before they turned west and went into Israel itself.
So they're going from east to west to.
Yes.
So Shittim is on the side of the river same as Jordan, and then crossing over Jerusalem.
I got to get a map. I have a map, but
you know what I mean, though. My question.
Yes,
yeah, I get you. Yeah,
you're not the first person to wonder that.
Yeah, I'd like to clear that up. Just for historical and political reasons, I'd like to know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I will go get my ancient map. I have an atlas from 1932, I think. Probably has it, but it's buried in the next room someplace.
Well, this is a little pre-1932, right?
You think?
I'm sure we can find it. I'm sure we can Google it and find out. We're going from east to west. I thought we were going from west to east. I mean, they're crossing the river. So we're saying, so what's the land of Canaan? What was promised? Okay, here's Anne. Anne is going to clear it up. The Jewish people. Okay.
Let me look up Shittim and see if I can find where it is.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the question about the origin of the word Shittim.
Which is?
I don't know. I don't know if it means anything, interesting or not. Just a question.
I don't find it in the index here.
Oh, let me go get my atlas.
I'm going to just Google it with a different browser. I'll still be here, but I'm going to open another browser. Okay. I got it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can't see you anymore. I've lost you.
Okay.
Well, I looked it up and I'll tell you what I found, even though I can't see you, if you can hear me. Shittim is definitely east of the Jordan River. It's very well east. And Jericho is on the other side. Jericho is west. And so their crossing is, I think Anne said, they're crossing from east to west. And so why are they east? As Naomi said, if you're coming from Egypt, why would you be on the east side of the river? I don't know. Can anyone hear me?
Oh,
yeah,
well,
I can hear you.
They never ask for directions, so
because a man was in charge.
Right.
I can't.
Yeah, this map is not particularly good.
Well, I Googled it and I saw very clearly. Shittim is well to the east of the Jordan River and Jericho is on the other side. So we have to find out what was the route that Moses took through the desert.
Yeah,
It looks like they got lost.
yeah. Call Sephora and ask her. She was probably
She was probably trying to give him directions, but he wouldn't listen.
he wouldn't listen.
Okay, here's my map. I wish you could
Love
see
this
it.
stuff in a way because it's such fun to play with Pimple. You know, with what does this really mean? And you get these old Talmudic tracts and scholars sitting there with the whole outfits and arguing about this. Well, the wives were- Okay, I got to make a phone call, guys. It's been lovely.
All right, see you later.
Live long and prosper.
I can't get back into the meeting, so I'll say goodbye. Nice to see you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you, Eileen.
Same here.
Where are you? Where are you, Eileen?
I'm with my son and daughter-in-law. I'm not living in my apartment.
Oh, here you
Okay.
are.
I will be back when the virus is gone.
Well, very
Okay.
good. Very comfortable there.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're very, very kind and good to me.
Wonderful. That's wonderful.
Wonderful. That's great.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to figure out the route they took some other time.
Okay. I've got this historical atlas of the Jewish people. It's got a lot of stuff in it.
I wish I could show you the map. I just Googled, it came up very easily, but I can't show it to you.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right. Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Out. Bye-bye.
Zeitgesund.
All right. Be well. Nice to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.